Hey guys, welcome back to Disney Coffee and Book Talk. I'm your host Alex. It's a Sunday, which means we are doing the annotation of Harry Potter chapter 6. And before I dive into this, because I know that some people might be like, why are you doing the annotation when she's a problem and she's tweeting all this stuff? Look, here's her latest that I saw as I'm filming this. We're going to talk about it. This is exactly why I'm doing the annotation. I know there's hypocrisy about still giving her attention, but my point of this series has been to prove that you can't separate the art from the artist. And earlier on threads, I saw someone say like, were we reading the book all wrong? And the simplest answer is yes. That is the entire purpose of my annotation. Because as I've learned more and more and dived in, things are just popping up. So we're going to talk about her tweet first. If you want to skip forward, I totally understand. I've kind of gone over some of the same points in my first video in terms of JK specifically, with how harmful she is and her transphobia and things like that. Firstly, I want to say that women's rights include all women of all intersexualities, whether you're Black, Indigenous, Latinx, trans, part of the other parts of the LGBTQ. You deserve the same rights as everyone. To also say that while Trump himself is surrounded by young women, and I'm not even going to touch their looks besides them being young, is utterly disgusting. This man is our current president is, you know what, I'm not going to hold back. He has pedo vibes, okay? He's a PDF. He was found liable in court with to have raped, and people just ignore that. He has 34 felonies. He's been impeached twice. Clearly there are people that do not care about that. And we're like 2 weeks into his presidency and it's gone to shit. I knew it was going to be bad. I knew it was going to be worse than his first presidency, but in any stance, if you support him or any of these people, J.K. Rowling, Elon Musk, etc., if you're going to ignore the bigotry and be silent, I get not everyone feels that they're bigoted, but if you're going to be silent, then you are complicit. Gonna say that, okay? It is what it is. That's my thoughts. So anyway, going back to JK here. I feel like she confuses herself with, she says she's for LGBT, well, LGB, not the T, obviously. We know she hates trans women. She doesn't, as far as I know, she doesn't say anything about trans men, which is kind of interesting, but that's a whole other thing. But on that note, I also want to state that this woman, this cis hetero woman, had decided, I'm going to say decided, she didn't have to use initials to sound more man-like as an author. Now, I want to be clear. If you're using a pen name, that is not an issue. Many people use pen names, okay? There is nothing wrong with that. There is a history of pen names, especially used by women to get their works out. That is not new. But considering that she did this in the 90s when it was getting much better for women, and I'm going to make it clear, it hasn't always been that way, and then decided to write in a new genre and decided to use a different pen name that is directly male sounding, Robert Galbraith, a name that she claims, and I'm putting that in quotes, in an interview that said she was inspired by Robert F. Kennedy, and a name that she, that's why she used Robert, and then a name that she like had come up with for the last name. Mind you, Robert Galbraith Heath, okay, making that clear, is an actual person who used conversion therapy to harm the LGBTQ. So this is not new. I also want to make it very clear that in her books, and again, this is why I'm annotating it, her bigotry is so clearly there, right? So, someone had made a note like, oh, I don't think she wrote, you know, book 3 and on. No. She did. It's still there. Very much there. But like, you cannot separate your bigotry from your books, your art, right? I know a lot of us, you know, Harry Potter lover. Look, I used to be deep into the fandom, okay? When I say deep, like, I knew the actors. People thought I was weird. Look, I get it. We grew up with this, but at this point, to not understand that there are so many levels of bigotry in her work. There's anti-Semitism, there's anti-Blackness, there's anti-Asian, there is Nazi sympathizing, right? There's so much more. And yet, we cannot separate the, you know, that I'm at a loss of words at this point. And then to have Elon Musk saying, oh, she's smarter than everyone because she realizes it. Mind you, the same man who has a trans child, teenager, they are a teenager, the same man who's taken HRT to help with weight loss and stuff, right? Who's had gender affirming care. The same man who's an illegal immigrant. Yes, he technically came here on a visa, but he lied about what the visa was for and is here. The same man who has done multiple Nazi salutes, who's doing criminal acts with our felon of a president who is also a Nazi sympathizer, among other things, a bigot. It does not surprise me. It really does not. Anyway, that's enough of this. We're going to move on to annotating chapter 6, because while this is the start of Harry getting on the train, it's like the train ride, and then the first years are seeing, it ends with the first years seeing the castle and going up the stairs. Well, I know it's different than the movie, but that's where it ends. Even in this chapter, there were quite a few things that spoke out to me. Now, this is going to be shorter. It was a shorter chapter, but I do want to make note of certain moments. First of all, the way that Vernon Dursley and Petunia and Dudley continue to treat Harry, utterly disgusting. Dudley also needs gender affirming care at this point because, well, he still had the tail from Hagrid, which I think is freaking hilarious after a month. But you guys get the point. The way that they mocked Harry and Harry being different right? Different being like, oh, he would be like an immigrant or like he's in a marginalized community at this point, right? Compared to um, the Dursleys, is utterly disgusting. Okay. Then I want to note that the way that Fred and George Weasley were talking to their mother about Harry, and her response was, he's not a zoo creature, right? Like, don't be ogling with him. Like, treat him respectfully, right? He's a person. He's a child, you know. I think that's an important note because a lot of marginalized communities, you know, those that were different, especially Black men and women, were put in zoos as to be ogled at. Okay, there's a deep discussing history of zoo life, using humans. I don't really want to get into that right now. Excuse me. Maybe we'll talk about that at a different time. But there's a deep history of this. Actually, I should probably talk about that with the ballads of Songbirds and Snakes by Susan Collins. There was a scene in there that is exactly that. Although that's fiction. You guys get the point. Anyway, there's a history of that, and I think it's important to note. I also want to note that when J.K. was describing Lee Jordan, the usage of dreadlocks, like, why did you need to use dreadlocks? Like, there's other terms for like twists and things like that. Like, it was just degrading in my opinion. Also, I want to note that he was the only character that was called out by race when she's written, but also in the scene, in the movie, like on the train as well as on the platform. So really, there's not a whole lot of diversity, and when she does put diversity, it's usually pretty disgusting. So just want to, and I like Lee Jordan as a character, even in the movie. Like, that's not my problem. It's the way that he's described, right? The actual character, Lee Jordan, is not the problem. I want to make that clear. Okay, that being said, there were other things like the way that, and this popped up in my mind as I was reading it, the way that she described Draco with the blonde hair. And, you know, we knew that, you know, his family was Death Eaters and things like that, is very much Nazism, right? Hitler wanted blonde hair, blue-eyed people, right? Now, I do want to make it clear that not everyone was going to be blonde hair, blue-eyed. Like, if they agreed with what they were doing, there was like, okay. But Hitler himself saw those with this particular look as a status, right? And that's kind of the way that she herself was seen. Well, yes, Hitler was bad, and she kind of sort of did that with Draco, right? Like, we can, there's moments later on where you can kind of sympathize with him, and I'm talking like book 6, right? There's not a whole lot of sympathy for him. He's brainwashed, as is a lot of people. But of course people are going to like him, right? There's always going to be, oh, but he's the bad boy, oh, he's the villain, like, fall in love. Look, I love, you know, the anti-hero stuff, okay? But Draco Malfoy is not one of those, okay? Like, very much surrounding you know, World War II and anti-Semitism and anti-marginalized communities, because if you actually know the history of the Holocaust, it wasn't just, you know, the Jewish communities that were massacred. You know, it was Romani and other individuals, anyone that didn't agree with them. Gosh. Then on the card where it was reading about Albus Dumbledore, it specifically did say 1945. So of course, you know, World War II ended in 1945. It talked about the defeat of the Dark, you know, the Dark Lord, Dark Wizard. So it's a little bit more obvious that she's trying to play up to, oh, but you know, there's these good people and they defeat the bad people. I still think that there's still a lot that, like, there's still a lot, right? And I also want to note that the way that Ron and Harry were talking, you know, Harry grew up in the Muggle realm, whereas Ron only grew up around wizards, and how things were very different and how they kind of see each other. Well, I should say, being Muggle, they didn't necessarily know about the wizards, but the wizards knew about the Muggles, but not to the same extent. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, they were talking about the photographs, right? How Dumbledore just disappeared. And Harry said, well, in the Muggle world, they're always just in the same picture, right? It's not like a moving video. And whereas in the wizarding world, they go from picture to picture to picture and can travel around, etc., like they're actual human beings. And Ron's response was weird, like, oh, like, kind of degrading the Muggle world. I don't know, like, I'm not saying that. How do I explain this? I know how to explain it. So I was having a conversation the other day on Threads, and someone was saying, oh, we were talking about how curriculums, I said that a lot of curriculums are whitewashed and very Christian based, right? Even though they may not directly have the Bible, that is the lens of the curriculums. And someone else goes, well, you know, when you read about them, they're weird and different and stuff. And I said, it's only weird and different to you because you don't practice them, right? That's the same vibe, right? You're learning about things being not your normal is going to seem different. And instead of trying to be unbiased about it, like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's interesting, right? Or that's different, right? That's a little bit more unbiased, right? Whereas, oh, weird, right? Like, it's just a little bit more degrading. Now, I'm not saying that Muggles were in any way marginalized per se, but it's just a different culture, right? Just different. I also want to note that there are plenty of themes throughout the book, not specifically this chapter, of, you know, whiteness and Christianity. Okay, like, it's big. Anyway, the last thing I want to note was there was some misogyny mentioned, and that was towards Hermione in the first way that she was introduced, right? Specifically saying the word, oh, she had a bossy tone of voice. So I want to make it clear that you don't say bossy when it comes to men or boys, but you do say it towards girls. Like, I, as a young girl, was called bossy just because I was seen as more intelligent, right? Now, I'm not saying I am more intelligent. I'm just saying that is the look, right? So there's the anti-intellectualism, there's the misogyny towards girls. Like, instead of saying, oh, she had more confidence, right? She she was able to express herself a different way. You know, even saying like, oh, she just spoke more quickly. Like, there was just a little bit of tone, right, that Hermione had. And that's not to say, like, we have moments of her later in the book where she's more unsure of herself. She has a little bit less self-confidence that she puts out. But in this moment, she was confident. She was excited. She had passion, right? That's what's coming forward in her, like, oh, like, hi, like, she's introducing herself, and oh, you should probably get on your robes and things like that. And she's trying to help Neville. Like, bossy is, I just don't like the word, right? Like, if you have a boss, are they being bossy by telling you what to do? Like I said, are you saying that same thing towards men and boys? Because I never hear that described towards men and boys. Not once. Only towards young girls. Specifically young girls. Not even, I would say probably rarely towards women, but usually towards young girls. And then it makes them lose their self-confidence. Right? Oh, like, I can't be a leader? So anyway, that's pretty much... No, I have one other thing that I want to say. Sorry. One more thing. I kind of went over the Draco thing, but I want to get back to that. When it came to Draco, right? And him saying, oh, you don't want to be making friends with the wrong sort of people, right? He exudes power. He exudes confidence. He is saying that, hey, us, you know, full-blooded muggles, or sorry, full-blooded wizard family that don't fight against power, that, you know, are, it's the alt-right, it would be like the Proud Boys or the Nazis and the neo-Nazis and all these groups that are very much like, you gotta be cis, you gotta be hetero, you gotta be, you know, Christian and all of that, because otherwise they don't really see you as something, right? And I want to give that an example because even Ron, who comes from a long line of, you know, wizarding family, right? They were talking about that in the book. He was seen as less than, and it's because his family, his family didn't have as much money, right? So there's also classism in there. But also the way that the Weasleys had always fought back and did what was right morally, ethically, you know, treated everyone with love and respect, but still fought back, you know, against what was wrong. We're seen less than by, of course, the alt-right, right? This group, these conservative wizards. And I also want to make it clear that in this chapter, you know, Ron was saying that the Malfoys were the first ones to come out of the trance and say, oh my gosh, like we were, you know, like we were under a spell and stuff. Just goes that they were trying to save face, but they didn't actually save face. Like, they were still very much this way. Now, we know that throughout the book, but even their attitudes and what they say and their actions towards other people are very clear on their stance, right? So, want to make that clear. I feel like I'm missing something. I kind of want to... Yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it. We'll be back next Sunday for chapter 7, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your weekend.